Okay, here we are. Welcome back to the DPT to CEO podcast for another amazing episode and interview with our special guest. If you are new, if this is your first time tuning in on this podcast, we are talking with other healthcare providers who have gone on to run their own businesses. And we talked about all kinds of things from sales to marketing to how to live your best life and not completely lose your marbles in the process of growing a business. And so if you are a physical therapist, occupational therapist, healthcare provider out there, and you're looking for help with starting and growing your business, head over to morganmeese.com for more information on all kinds of things that we can help you with, or check out the show notes below. But without further ado, we have a special guest with us here today. Welcome, Bethany. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited for today.
Yeah, me too. Bethany and I connected online. I'm pretty sure I got an email from you and we just started talking a little bit more about like overall wellness for business owners and everything. And I know that's what we're going to dive into today. A lot of our episodes tend to focus more on like the technical side of business, but I was really excited to be able to connect with you so we can talk about taking care of the business owner, because otherwise the business will not run. So thanks for being here to talk about that. But I guess maybe if you don't mind telling us a little bit more about you and your story and what you're doing now.
Yeah, definitely. So I started kind of this journey, like I always tell people I start backwards. So I kind of started in the space of, I actually was a nurse prior to doing my business. So never really thought I was going to be an entrepreneur at the end of the day. And I was kind of mentioning that to my partner recently, is that I never sort of told myself like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Like this is like my path. It just sort of like fell that way. So I went and got my nursing, and I started in the hospitals, really. I saw a lot of people that were kind of too far gone. And I realized like I want to definitely be in a space that can help people prevent them to getting in the hospitals in the first place. I ended up in a clinic and I worked in a diet and health clinic for 5 years. So that was kind of a huge eye opener, and it really opened the doors for me for nutrition. And I was very, very excited about it because it was helping people get healthier, lose weight, like manage like symptoms and things like that. But then working there for a long period of time, what I noticed was I wasn't really helping people. So I kind of was like, okay, now like I'm at this point now that I need to actually kind of look at different aspects of nutrition. And I went back to school and got my certified holistic nutritional consultant diploma in food, and basically got a way better understanding of how food can sort of help us. And, you know, obviously working in that space, it really made me see that there's a lot of emotional components around food. People kind of use it for lots of different things. It can be a reward, it can be punishment, it can be cultural, it can be lots of different things. So what I actually did was I decided to start my business, and it kind of, I'm one of those that you kind of sort of have to kick me out the nest to get me going. And that was when I was pregnant with my first son. So I decided to kind of start my business once my first son came into the picture. And now I have 2 sons. So currently they are 9 and 11 years old. So I feel old. All of a sudden. But yeah, it's so interesting to see kind of like how they've grown up with like what I've taught them and everything. Basically, what I do now is I work virtually. I help lots of different businesses with their clientele. I work with a lot of people that are struggling in terms of trying to lose weight is usually like a number one thing from a lot of people. And that's mainly the reason why most people do come to me. But the other aspect is a lot of health conditions. And I do work in the fertility space and stuff as well, trying to help women get pregnant, stay pregnant, kind of look after their bodies. But what I've noticed is there's a lot of misinformation out there. And being a business owner myself, I've had to sort of learn how to take care of myself and better my health and everything. And that's why I'm here today talking to your crowd as well. Yeah. So basically, that's kind of in a nutshell who I am and kind of how I started.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think it's like a common thing, amongst all of us as healthcare providers who are getting into business for ourselves to feel like, we go into it wanting to help people, like you said, and then realizing that like the structure that is like, I guess, like set up societally, like at large, is just not always conducive to helping people or helping people in the way that like feels right to us. And so we
Right.
end up getting into doing things ourselves because we know we can do it a little bit better. As a business owner, so you've been in business now how many years?
16 years in total, like in being health and wellness space and being a nurse as well. So all in all, 16 years. That makes me feel like an old fogey, but yeah, it's given me a lot of information, and also having gone through kind of the postpartum period, the pregnancy period, like all that fertility period for myself too. Like I understand all of that, and recovery, which is obviously, you know, to do with physio and stuff as well. And
Mhm.
there's a long journey ahead for a lot of people, and it's great listening to everyone's stories as well.
Yeah, yeah. And so I guess like from your perspective as a business owner, like since you started working for yourself up until now, I guess if you don't mind telling us maybe, and I can share like my own kind of stuff, but
Mhm.
like what have you noticed in yourself, like mental, emotional, physical health? Like how has the journey been as a business owner, and how have you, I guess, done things to support yourself in that way along the journey?
It's definitely a hard one getting into business for yourself. Like I said, I wasn't sort of looking to be an entrepreneur. It sort of just happened that way. Unfortunately, I actually had a very different life circumstance that kind of put me in that position, I would say. I actually became a widow when my boys were 3 and 5 years old. So I was kind of looking for something at home. I already had my business going, but it really kind of gave me that fire basically under my bum just to kind of get things moving. And I really had to like make a decision. And I think that's sort of when I was like, again, that kicked out the nest. I had
Mhm.
to sort of make that decision for myself. So I kind of had this set up already in about 2018. Like, you know, I had an office space and everything before, but I really had to sort of solidify like boundaries with my kids in terms of like when I was working, and I had to sort of find my schedule. So I found that that was a little more difficult. So if you have parents out there, it's trying to sort of find that time to like work in your business and build it as well, because you have to do a lot of building before you kind of go out there in the streets and find your clientele or a business to business, depending on what you're doing.
Mhm.
I found that the boundaries was a hard one because again, it meant that I had to sort of say no to my little kids and like, you know, this is my time to work and I'll play with you later. Trying to find stuff for them to do was also extremely entertaining, and trying to figure that out. And then COVID happened. And then
Mm.
yeah, for a lot of people that was the following year. So I had already been kind of virtual online like before. So I kind of already had that setup, which I was thankful for. Whereas a lot of people were kind of getting into that mode of like, how do I do this now? How do I move my business and pivot? And I think probably one of my strong suits is that I can pivot because I have had quite a few things that have sort of spanners being thrown into the mix. So when COVID happened and everybody sort of had to stay home and work from home, I was already doing it. And the only thing that was really different was that my kids were home.
Mhm.
So that was interesting because I kind of didn't have that time frame where they normally would be at like a school or something like that. So I really had to sort of learn to manage my time.
Mhm.
Obviously, the stress increased pretty well. And I think a lot of parents had the same issues as well. I think what I had to figure out was a schedule, and that seemed to really help. Like having a schedule for me, having a schedule for them, giving myself a bit more slack, like a bit more of a break to realize like I'm not going to be able to get 100% done in my day. I'm going to
Mhm.
have to do the hard things first, wake up earlier or go to bed later. Like these are the kind of things I was having to do. Sometimes it required, you know, eating at my desk, making a smoothie, like things that was easier to kind of cut down on my time in
Mhm.
terms of like going into the kitchen, now having to make lunch and things like that. Also, pre-packing my boys' lunches ahead of time really saved time as well. So I didn't have to keep coming out and like seeing to them. We really had to sort of find a system again with the at-home experience. And then obviously a few things got back into kind of normalcy, and we kind of kept to those schedules, which has been really good. The mental side of the business, I think I think a lot of business owners go through this, but like the failure, and a lot of people feel like, you know, there's a lot more no's, like 90% no's more than there are yes. And you kind of question yourself a lot, and you can have a couple of bad days, couple of bad weeks, and you're like, why am I doing this? Like, oh, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
I find for me, I'm a very self-disciplined person, and I have friends that say to me, like, I don't know how you work from home. Like, I wouldn't be waking up early in the morning or like motivating myself. For me, I just am a very scheduled person, but I do notice if I see dishes in the sink or laundry that needs to be done, like I'm having to sort of like stop myself. And sometimes I'll start folding laundry. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I need to go, like, and you know what I mean? So it's kind of like a
Yeah.
procrastination. So you kind of have to keep your eye out for that too. And that's part of being an entrepreneur, is that you kind of have that squirrel brain where you're like, oh, idea, or like
Yeah.
something else. And you kind of have to just keep focused. So for me, I think the guidelines I sort of really stick to is do the hard stuff first. The things that you really don't like doing when you wake up in the morning, those are
Mhm.
the first things, honestly, get them off your list so you feel more accomplished and you get them done. And then having a schedule in place, that's really helpful. Big on mental health. So like if you're having a really bad day where like just things aren't working, like for me, it's technology. It's like, this isn't working again. And I'm like trying to figure it out.
Mhm.
And I'm not an IT person and I'm not all this. So again, you're wearing many different hats. For me, it's about, okay, do I need to step back today? Do I need to like just take maybe a 2 hours, go to the gym or go for a walk in nature or just go make myself some food? Or sometimes if it's really bad, I'm like, just go lay down. Like
Yeah.
just don't do anything, just lay down and like take a break. And what I notice is when I step back, I'm actually better when I come to my business again because I have more ideas. I'm more inspired, more motivated versus before in the past. I was kind of like, no, just like grin and bear it, like stay at your computer. And then my eyes would be like rolling in the back of my head. Like if I have to look at like a screen any longer, like, so yeah, all in all, like it's very challenging and you're learning. I think what entrepreneurs don't realize is that you're learning so many skills along the way. As much as you feel like maybe you don't feel successful or you haven't had like an amazing productive day, like these skills like day to day are stacking up and
Mhm.
you're learning so many different leadership skills, like, communication skills, like everything. Like you're wearing all the hats pretty much in a
Yeah.
nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like there's so much to it, And so I feel like Bethany, I feel like you brought up so many like good points and tips about things that I want to dive into a little bit more. But for people who are listening, if you're like brand new to working for yourself, this is all really good information, I think, for you to have kind of up front, like all the different components that are kind of going into the business. It's not just find new clients, but there's like a lot
Yeah.
of other things around it.
Yes.
And for more of like our veterans and people who have been working for themselves for a little while, I hope that this helps you feel like you're not alone, like it's not just you. All of us feel this way, from
Mhm.
at least at some point, feel like scattered and overwhelmed. But creating a lot of structure definitely is super helpful. And so I want to talk a little bit more about like boundaries and where I've been talking to some of my clients and what I've been doing a lot more for myself this year is like creating the like structure and schedule, like you mentioned, both for
Mhm.
you and for your family. And I think, like, I don't know if I can verbalize this well, but I think where I used to get like really, I guess, like stuck and just like wouldn't be able to actually like work on the business as much is when you go from working for somebody else to working for yourself, you go from like a pre-built like structure in your life and a pre-built schedule to now you have like a blank slate and you have to make the structure yourself,
Yeah.
which is like a totally like new thing. And so I guess like with all of that, what has like helped you create a good schedule and stick to it?
So, because my boys were so little and I was in the middle of like a building phase, so I was building out like a membership phase, I had to do a lot of content where I needed quiet time, which with like at the time, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old is not very quiet. So, I was literally like waking up before them, like 4 or 5 a.m. So,
Mhm.
I go to bed a little bit earlier. So, I get up a little bit earlier, get those videos recorded. And again, that was like the chunk and the hard part of my day. The rest of the time, I'd have to just be like editing videos and putting that together. So that was kind of like the beginning phase. Generally, for me personally, I've always been into fitness. So I've always made sure I've gone to the gym, whether I was pregnant or whatever. So that's more for me, more so for my mental health, because I know when I'm stressed, like, and you're definitely when you're sitting in a chair all day, you're kind of crumpled up and you're like, I just feel like a bag of potatoes. And you're like, I want to get out there and like move. So even if you go for like a walk or something, it just moves the body. It makes you feel better. And I find that that's kind of good for me, like halfway through my day, which for me is sort of around like the 11 to 1 p.m., like, sorry, 11 a.m. to like 1 p.m. mark, because that's where I usually have the most energy. Even though I could sit down and work forever, that's, normally what I would like to do, but I also know I need to move. So I put activity kind of halfway through my day. And then it's usually when I get home from my workout, I'm usually naturally hungry. So I'll make myself a snack or lunch and have that. And that's usually probably at my desk because I can actually work and eat at the same time. But I always make sure when I do dinners and things like that with my kids, like we're eating at the table, there's no distractions, there's no cell phone, there's no TV or anything like that around. So I'm a big component on at least like one meal a day. Like make sure you sit down with your family, trying to sort of find, like I said, like easier solutions for yourself. So I'm big on sort of being sort of simple with your business in terms of like, don't have too many systems in place because first of all, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Second of all, is some of them can integrate, some of them you can get for free. Do things sort of more easier for yourself and also for your clients as well. That makes the process easier. So it sort of takes out that time of you running around chasing people. Like automation is sort of there to help you. So I think that has taken a lot of time off my hands. AI has been really helpful as well for me. Definitely is kind of more of a personal assistant that you can sort of chat with. So that's sort of a time saver too, which has been very helpful. But yeah, I would say definitely with your timing, get your priority done like in the morning, schedule that around. If I find a lot of people too, like they'll kind of do two jobs. So they'll have like another, like you said, an employee job, and then they'll do their business like in the evening or at nighttime. So that might just be for like money in terms of like funding yourself while you're doing it. Obviously, you sort of have to sacrifice, unfortunately, something in your day. For me, family is huge. So family is not the sacrifice for me. The boundary issue for me was more so being on my phone, replying back to like messages from people. And it wasn't really something I needed to like do right away. So that was something I had to learn for myself, was because that would take time out of my day and someone would just randomly call me and like want to talk for an hour. And it gets to the point where you're like, I can't do that anymore. Like I need to use those hours to like do my business. And saving that time, what I've done, I've saved that social media time, I guess, or chatting with friends or family, like more so in the evening once I've kind of done dinner with the kids and they're kind of going to bed. So that's sort of what I've done. And what you'll realize is people will kind of realize your boundaries and they'll stop calling, they'll stop texting at those times, and they'll be like, oh, you're not picking up anymore or something. But yeah, you're working. Like you kind of have to realize that like it would be like you were at a job, right? You can't just like at a job be like, yeah, give me a second, I'm just with a client or a patient. Like I'm just gonna call my friend. Like you got to kind of keep those same guidelines for yourself, more like the non-negotiables, I would say.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like it's a big mindset shift, where I feel like it probably comes from, like a lack of confidence when you're first getting started and you're like starting a business. It doesn't feel real for a while. At least it didn't for me, when I was first starting, and you kind of have to like just convince yourself that it is real. It is a real job and you have to have real boundaries in place. Otherwise, it's not going to actually grow to a place where it will pay you like a real job. And what I was kind of hearing that I love about like your designing of your schedule is that you set up your schedule in a way that it hits all the things that are important to you. So you're designing your schedule in a way that it will best serve you so that, like you can do your best work for your clients, rather than, I know when I first started and what I see with a lot of people I work with is we will look at the blank slate of the week and set a schedule according to what we think other people are going to want from us. So, like I need to have availability for appointments like all day long, every single day. And like in reality, like that's not going to help anybody.
No.
It's really, really stressful. And then you're not giving yourself like the time and space to like experience the things in your life that you wanted as a result of running a business. So like if you're just giving yourself over to what you think all of these future clients might want from you, rather than designing a schedule that incorporates the values of family and your own time and your own fitness and your own health, it's not going to be a good experience in the end.
Right. And I think that's the guilt factor. So there's a couple, like, especially being a mom, there's a guilt factor of not doing enough in your business and telling yourself that maybe. And I think what you were sort of explaining as well is the imposter syndrome of the kind of like, oh, it's not a real business, it's a hobby, So I think that's quite common. What I sort of relied on in my own self, I guess, when that like came up was that no, like I am a professional, like I have gone to school for nursing, like I've got previous experience, I've done all this, and I can rely on those skills, and I was professional, and I put myself sort of back in that, like I'm wearing my work attire because I had scrubs back then, nursing scrubs and all that. And you put on that hat when you go into that like employee type of job. So you're putting on like those clothes, you're putting on that hat. And honestly, if whatever gets you into that mode, I think for me, it's like dress. So like when I kind of dress up and I go like do my work, versus most people during COVID were wearing like sweats and stuff, or like everything great up and like pajamas on the bottom. But that's where I think you start to slide a little bit, like where you're like not really presenting yourself. So again, like I think if you kind of dress up and you act as if you're going to work, like you lock your office door, like this is my like boundary, private space, I think that helps. So you kind of have to sort of set the stage for yourself to do that. And what you were kind of talking about in terms of like people booking all over the place. So I'll give you kind of an example. So with the automated system, it's great, but sometimes when you have people in different countries, like I've had it where someone booked like in the middle of the night because they were on a completely different time schedule.
Yeah.
And my alarm was set for like 7 a.m. that morning. And I wake up and this person's like, hey, I had a call booked with you at 7 a.m. Like, where are you? And I'm like looking at my phone like, ah. So I was like, oh, I didn't go into the back end of this scheduling thing and say like, there needs to be a 24-hour block so they can't.
Yeah.
So you learn these lessons. Like that was one time that it happened, but it taught me going forward, like I have to have that in place because I've got people all over the world in completely different time zones, and they may be booking, I don't know, like nighttime their time, thinking like, oh, she's going to be awake. And then you completely have the wrong setup. So just stuff like that, you have to learn from your mistakes. And with sort of the scheduling of time for clients and everything, less is more. So if you have less availability and you have certain days that you work and you kind of block off, for me, like I block off more Fridays, like unless I absolutely have to with a client or something. But to me, like I'd rather kind of get like my back end stuff done and get everything sort of figured out and finished for the Friday to kind of get in for the next week. And then I want to spend time with my kids because my kids are around more so on Friday, and the weekends for me, I don't work either. And that was where I used to work before. And what I noticed was if I worked into Saturday, I was burnt out on Monday. So to start my week on a Monday, I was like, I almost just needed that weekend time.
Yeah.
So taking that step back and saying like, I don't need to work every hour, all hours of the day, giving yourself a block of time that you make yourself available, because you have to also put those boundaries in with patients and clients as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like, for me, like something that I will tell myself and I share with others is like whether we are working with, like patients or like health clients, or even like myself, like working with other business owners, if I'm suggesting to have these kinds of boundaries to other people, I should also probably do them myself most of the time, like to lead by example, so that I can show up like as my best self for everybody that I'm working with. Like with physical therapy too, like I'm a big believer in, if I'm going to tell somebody to do certain like exercises or treatment for rehab, if I have the same problem, I should also do them.
Right.
So yeah, but that's also helpful, Bethany, like all the stuff about like the structure and the schedule. I think that'll be really great for our listeners to hear. And another thing that I wanted to ask you about, I'm like reading my notes over here because we brought up kind of like the working from home, working virtually thing. And I think like a lot of the people in the audience of this podcast, they are people who are on the go. You know, they might be working a job at a clinic, they might be working at their homes, they might be driving to clients' houses, might be just working on the computer all the time. We're super busy, just like the two of us. How do we eat well, Bethany? How can we make eating well easy?
It's super interesting because I think there's a lot of misconception. I think that people think that to eat healthy, you need to go and get fast food. Like you're on the run, you need to grab something on the go. Like it's not always that case. I think a lot of people, what they don't realize is that you can pre-plan ahead, and it's smart to do that, especially if you are super busy, because you want to be able to give your brain the nutrients to be able to sit at your desk or do your work for 8-12 hours, however long you're doing it during the day. And you can expect yourself to function off of nothing. Like your brain uses so much glucose more than anything. And if it doesn't have that, it's going to steal it from your body, basically. So you lose concentration if you don't eat properly. You lose energy. You know, your whole energy goes down. So if you're doing a talk, or you've got a client that you want to deal with and you're hungry, like it can affect like everything. It can make you feel angry. It can make you like your blood sugar's low. Like it just it's too many variables to set up a bad day. So really, that's what's important for people that are sort of on the go and don't have anything planned out. I always suggest a smoothie, because that's the quickest way to sort of like pack a bunch of nutrients into something really condensed. And you can drink it on the go and just kind of take it with you. You can put a scoop of healthy protein powder in there. You can put a tablespoon of peanut butter. You can put some flax or some flax oil or flax seed in there, or hemp seeds. So you get some healthy fat in there as well. A big component, especially for women, I noticed that they don't do during the day is not enough protein. So a lot of people live off carbohydrates. So crackers and things like that out of a box, or like processed foods. And it's just to kind of like keep you from feeling hungry, but it's not actually giving you enough food to give you that energy throughout the day. So I usually suggest, cutting up your fruits and veggies ahead of time. So you have them in containers. They're not going to last too long. They're going to last a few days, but I would just suggest having those kind of on hand in the fridge, kind of at eye level, because when you're hungry, you're going to go to the fridge and you're going to snack on the first thing that you see, what is accessible. Right. Same with the pantry. It's kind of the first box that you can open. If you have like nuts and seeds, like healthy fats available, peanut butter, you can put on some crackers. If you're in a pinch, protein smoothies, like I said, is really helpful. And making sure you also have like dinner set up as well, because a lot of people go long periods of time throughout the day without eating. A lot of people live off coffee, and that's an appetite suppressant. So they're not typically hungry when they drink coffee, and it goes into sort of missing breakfast and then having a later lunch. And then we're kind of crashing around 3 to 5 p.m. And most people are like ravenously hungry by then, and will overeat at dinner and then eat like late into the night. And that's more like emotional eating and stuff. You've had a bad day and you're like, oh, I just want a glass of wine or chocolate or chips or whatever. Like bring it out, like bring it all. So that kind of is like the majority of people and how they function. If you can kind of set yourself up for success, like what I talked about with the schedule, and at least most of the time during your week, you have something available for yourself, you're less likely to kind of crash and burn all the time.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and just like with like most stuff in the business, like the more in advance that you can plan for things, like the better off you're going to be, because it's just going to be a lot less stressful, and of course, like it takes effort to sort of like do meal planning and everything, but what definitely like helps me is just remembering that I don't have to like do it perfectly or do like 100% like all meals for the week planning up front. Like if that's too overwhelming, then like just starting with maybe like having an idea of what you're going to have for breakfast every day or dinner every day, and like let that be good enough for right now, because you can always like build off of that, to continue to move forward. So it doesn't have to be like an all or nothing thing.
Yeah. And I think You need to have a couple of resources in your toolbox as well, because there's going to be moments and times where you're out and about, or your plans didn't go through for that day, or you have to run to another meeting and you're like, oh, I don't have time to get that done. So I would suggest, like you said, it's kind of a, you're not trying to be 100% to it. You're trying to sort of get to that 80% mark most of the time for yourselves, but there's going to be times where things aren't always going to work. So I would suggest, like for me, I keep snacks like dried snacks, like jerky, like beef jerky or something, or trail mix in my car, because there's so many times I've been out and I'm like, I'm so hungry, and I'm like looking around, like, what do I go and get? And
Mm-hmm.
that's a typical thing for a lot of people. You get stuck in traffic, you go a long distance, there's no place to go and get something, or there's not a lot of healthy options around, or you don't really want to spend money. So it
Yeah.
kind of just depends on the person. But I always suggest having something like that at least in your car, your vehicle. So at least you're not stuck somewhere ravenously hungry. That's one. The other option too is have a couple of sort of like places to go and get food. Like we pick a lot of places like Subway, Freshie, a couple of bowl places. What is it, like smoothie places, like places that you can kind of get energy balls from. So at least we know there's kind of like these places around and where they are,
Mm-hmm.
or we pack something ahead of time. But it, like I said, it's not always going to be like planned, but at least you have something in place where you're not kind of last minute like driving to the McDonald's, right? And kind of getting that because you are hungry, right? And you're trying to find a way. Another thing is, if you are kind of stuck and there isn't too many like healthy places around, grocery stores in general do usually have like a deli section, and you can pick up sandwiches from there, like boiled eggs is already done, maybe roast chickens that are already cooked, like they're already kind of cut up and put into trays or boxes for you. So that's kind of another option that I've noticed people do as well. And you can get a couple of cans of different juices or water bottles or things like that on the go as well. And also, like if you do end up sort of like, I don't know, you're out with somebody and there's a client that you have to meet or something, and they've picked, a very unhealthy place, there's always ways you can kind of like have a better meal. Like even at burger joints now, they're being a bit more health conscious, and there's more salads and protein. There's more smoothie bowls. There's more like pizza type of like grilled flatbreads. And I've seen like them do lettuce wrap burgers. So there's always like other options. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
always have to be like junk food for convenience, basically.
Yeah. And I think it's a good reminder and a good thing to know is that like there are options out there.
Mhm.
So even just taking like a few minutes in the day, like if you have a meeting coming up that's at whatever restaurant, like you can check out their menu online and kind of like
Mhm.
figure out what might be a good option, and having the snacks in the car I think will be really helpful, especially like for the therapists and providers who are out there and listening to this, who are doing a mobile business where they're
Yeah.
traveling to clients all the time. That'd be a huge help. I should have done that when I was doing
Yeah.
mobile stuff. But no, I think that's a lot of like really good tips to help with the nutrition aspect of things, because like ultimately, and like why I wanted to, talk to you about these topics is for everybody who's listening, like you are going to be a much better like healthcare provider and a much better like business owner if
Mhm.
your brain and body are just like
Yeah.
functioning well.
Yeah, definitely. The other aspect I was going to say for the car is if it's the summer, you're in a hot place, is a
Hmm.
cooler box. Like bring an ice pack and a
Oh
cooler
yeah.
box. So
Hmm.
that way it keeps your food cool, because obviously you don't want to get in the car and eat like warm food. So that's kind of a good suggestion as well. But the other big one is, I don't think a lot of people realize this one either, is staying hydrated. Like that can
Hmm.
also affect your energy levels as well. A lot of people, again, like I said, drink a lot more caffeine, and
Hmm.
that's actually depleting. Yeah, like it's making you more dehydrated throughout the day. So if you drink a cup of coffee, you always need to make sure you like have a cup of water with you as well. Staying hydrated is a big one to support your energy and also your metabolism as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I always
Yeah,
have
so
this
you're
cup around
drinking a
with me.
giant, yeah.
Yes. I just like carry it with me like everywhere all the time. So that it's just always there and can always stay hydrated. The like last kind of like I guess wellness dimension thing that I wanted to ask you about is like sleep and recovery, because like one thing that I know has definitely happened to me and trying to get better about it is, when you're just like constantly going with the business and constantly doing things, like eventually you're going to hit a wall. And so like I've been trying to figure out better ways to kind kind of like, I like, I'll like joke about it to my husband because I'll have like a chock full schedule, you know, like all week. And then by the end of the week, I have to like put myself in timeout and be like, just relax for 1 hour, for like 1 second, please. Like just chill and just like let yourself reset. Even if I'm not sleeping, like just do something where it's not like work related and just relax. So like, what tips do you have on, I guess, like sleep and recovery and just making sure that you're not like working yourself to exhaustion all the time?
Yeah, that's quite common with entrepreneurship. It becomes a workaholic kind of nation.
Yeah.
And it can be very difficult to kind of get off that train because you feel so responsible in your own business and you feel like you should be doing more and like, oh, I've got this and this and this to do. The thing is, though, I always have to remind myself work will always be there no matter what you're doing. And you're going to eventually hit a wall or burn out. And do you want to be putting that energy into that project or that call or whatever it is that you have going on? And most of the time I'm like, no, because when I have done it and I've watched the recording or I've done something, I'm like, I want to redo that, you know? And so you're kind of taking more time now trying to redo something that, you know, you were too tired or you were just burnt out in general. That's why for me, like what I said with the Friday thing was that I was noticing if I pushed myself too far, too much, then I was so burnt out. I was like not kind of like there with my kids. I was sort of just like tuned out and it was hard to sort of like be in that moment with them. And I needed that like transition sort of like day with them going into sort of having more time on the weekend. And then Monday I was like ready to roll versus like I was pushing myself to kind of like get to like, oh, I need to do more, I need to do more. Now, there are times that I believe being an entrepreneur is very creative. You have a lot of ideas. I do believe there's times where, you know, you'll stay awake because you're inspired and you've got this great idea and you're like, I just need to get it down on paper. And I've had those too, where it's like 1, 2 a.m. I'm still working on my business, but I'm like in a great like moment. I've got this like amazing thing that I'm like, oh, I need to put all this down and I've got all these like ideas and put it together. And then I sleep really well. I sleep really well because I go to bed and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. But there's times where I've ignored it and it's like a dream or I'm falling asleep or like wake up and I have this like I need to do this in my business and I've ignored it and it won't let me like sleep.
Yeah.
So I kind of have to just get up and go do it. So I think it's just like these creative bursts of inspiration and I think utilize them. If you're, you know, it's early morning, you're like, oh, I want to do this and like get this all down or before nighttime, I think utilize that, but you kind of need to make up somewhere where like you do have that downtime. So there's ebbs and flows. And I don't think we are as entrepreneurs always going to be that sort of like this time to this time, because as you know, like your energy fluctuates, your, you know, how you feel like with your mindset for that day can fluctuate. Like some days I can do like a really amazing day, look at the time, I'm like, how did the time go by so fast? And other days I'm sort of twiddling my fingers going like, why can't I just like get this done today? And like this hour is taking forever. Like what is going on? And that's when I have to sort of reassess. For me personally, I find I start my day earlier and I have more inspiration, more energy. So I'm kind of more like I wake up at sort of like 6 a.m. and start working. And that's where like most of my, I think, energy, creativity, and I put a big chunk of that into the morning. And then I do a workout and then I sort of switch gears into other things in my business for the rest of the day that are kind of like more low maintenance things that I don't need to have too much like mind focus on. I find for sleep, that one for me is magnesium gel and magnesium bath salts really help sort of like naturally bring the body down, because I know when you're an entrepreneur and you have all this stuff going on, you're kind of buzzing a little bit. You're like, ee, and then you try and go to sleep and you're like, why can I not sleep? Because your brain is just like a hamster, right, on a wheel.
Yeah.
I find I need to sort of give myself hours before I go to bed to sort of like wind down, whether that's like reading a book, maybe watching just a show or something, or just taking some quiet time, because otherwise it's hard to kind of go from that like business brain to like, now I need to sleep. And you're kind of not giving yourself that like in between. Definitely give yourself restful sleep as well. Like you can't function again like 4 hours of sleep and then expect to like have a full day and not eat and do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's setting yourself up for disaster, unfortunately. So I think if something's not working, what I find I try and do is I kind of just write it down, look at it and go like, well, like how can I make this better for myself? Like if that's not working, where can I kind of adjust and tweak something? Because the more I'm going to do that, I'm just going to keep putting my head into a wall basically.
Mhm.
And it's that kind of like you're breeding insanity doing the same things over and over again. So if something's not working, or say you're too tired to wake up in the morning, like you kind of need to look at your schedule and go like, well, why? Like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? Am I looking at my phone all night and then I can't sleep because I've got devices all the time and I'm constantly kind of switched on. So, and I find that that's a lot for a lot of people too, is electronic.
Yeah, and I think that's really like important to remember, like with all the technology that we do have, it's amazing because it gives us like, I think, a much like quicker opportunity, to get into business and work for
Yeah.
ourselves and everything, but also remembering to sort of like find an endpoint and like minimize how often we really are on them. And something that you had mentioned earlier just about like responding to messages, like I think that's one of the things that like I have learned and like I try to be better about, is that like just because somebody messages you or emails you, you don't have to respond right away. Like
Right.
it's totally normal and reasonable, depending on the request, to respond within 24 hours to a week. Like
Right.
that's totally fine. And like I always remind myself and other people, like we're not in emergency services. I
Right.
guess like
Yeah.
99.9% of us, and
Hello.
like people, yeah, like
Yeah.
there's literally no emergency. And like you
Yeah.
said, like the business is always going to be there. The work is always going to be there.
Yes.
So like as long as you're like responding to things in a relatively timely manner, that's fine. And then like you also said, you're also like teaching people when they can expect to hear back from you, and then less stress, and like that'll also help with the sleep too. Yeah.
Definitely. And if it's something that's bothering you, so for example, you said an email or a message. So it's because the devices are in our hand all the time. A phone is like a new computer and it's with you every day all the time. It's almost making us so like too available for people, and people are expecting that like you didn't respond to me right away. But when you are running a regular business, they do have their hours of Monday to Friday, typically like 9 to 5 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you can't get a hold of them during the weekend. You can't do these things. So for me, that's where, unless it's like an absolute emergency where a client or something is like, hey, like I never got the thing that you sent me, or like, this disaster has happened, like, can you help? Like, yes, I'm going to respond to them. But if
Mhm.
it's just like a need to know kind of, it can wait for the week, or, responding to something that isn't a fire, that usually waits till like normal business hours. And I will just kind of make a note for myself to get back to them, obviously. So I always just make
Yeah.
sure I sort of put it in a file, like I will do this later.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a hard one to learn, because I was kind of the same, like when I first started, was that, you're sitting on your phone and all of a sudden you get messages and you're like, oh, and you're responding back. And I'm looking at the time going, I shouldn't be responding back. It's like 11 p.m. That's not a good idea. And it
Yeah.
teaches people to keep doing it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And then the next thing you know, you're just always getting messages at whatever, like 10
Yeah.
p.m. at night,
Yeah.
and it just no good, no good.
Yeah.
So definitely something to think about if that's you, the listener. That's a really like tiny like boundary I think you can start setting, is just saying, I'm not going to respond to business messages after like 6 p.m.
You don't need to
Reasonable.
explain yourself either to people.
No.
That's the other thing, because a lot of people are
Yeah.
like, well, I need to tell them. I'm like, no, you
Nope.
just don't. Like, just leave it be. Like, people will get the message,
Yeah.
and you're not being rude. You're just being professional.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we can title this episode. You're not being rude, you're just being professional. That would be great.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of switch gears next, Bethany. And I love, like last time we met, you told me a little bit more about how you kind of like partner with healthcare providers, physical therapists. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like and how that works? So our listeners out there, if this is something you're interested in, you can always reach out to Beth.
Yeah, definitely. So I kind of partner business to business more. So I work with lots of different practices, whether it's chiropractors, physiotherapy, got lots of personal trainers, fertility clinics, trying to think who else is in there, doctors, and psychology too. That's another one. So a lot of people, what I've noticed is that they're kind of missing that like element of nutrition in their practice. So whether you're a physiotherapist and that you're working with the body, and then what a lot of people are looking for are more like holistic practices now, and they're adding in sort of different components of like mental well-being, physical therapy, nutrition, because it all goes hand in hand, right? Like,
Mhm.
to help your body heal and rest and recover, like we need to eat properly, we need to sort of move our bodies in a certain way. And I think there's so many things that we can sort of do and put our expertise together and be that sort of combination business. And what I offer to businesses is basically that, is I offer my holistic nutrition services, something that you can put on your website, and then you basically are now showcasing that you offer nutrition. So that's something that you can offer to your clients, and whether they need to lose weight because they've got, too much weight on their joints, and they're recovering from surgery, they've got an accident that they're like dealing with, all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely something that's really useful and helpful, and it combines with already what you're doing. And I'm basically there to sort of like help put the puzzle pieces together. And that's how I work with, like I said, doctors and everything as well, is that I always never recommend them coming off any medication or anything like that, but I make sure I can sort of integrate supplements, holistic nutrition into what they're already doing. So that's what I really try and do with them. Business referrals, we work hand in hand, and I usually offer them a very good percentage cut as well for that, to have their clients come to me, use my services. And then obviously like once a month, I give them a cut and everything as well of that. So it's just to kind of add into their business, which I find a lot more people are doing, because there's more like telehealth and stuff out there that kind of covers that whole spectrum. So if you are starting your own business, a lot of clients are looking, and patients are looking more for that, like, how can I kind of find that spot that has everything now?
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And I think it's an awesome idea, just because I know, like, even with the patients that I'll typically work with are athletes, and of course, like, they want to get back to like working out, training, playing their
Mhm.
sport without the injury. And like, there is always going to be like an element of like inflammation with an
Yeah.
injury. But if we can also tackle, working together with you, Bethany, we can also tackle things like sleep, nutrition, stress, hydration, all of that
Yeah.
stuff. That's going to aid in the like physical therapy recovery process and make
Mhm.
it a lot smoother. And the athlete and the client that I'm working with is going to be that much better off. And I love this idea of just essentially like, you have sort of like a staff as the client where you have the PT, but you also have a nutrition expert on your side to help you
Yeah.
in the entire process. Very valuable, I think, as the client. So I think that's awesome. If somebody out there is interested in like potentially like partnering and working with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
I always just give my website. So it's www.ndelish.com, and there's all my information in there. I have a podcast. All my packages are listed, people I work with. So you can check out all of that stuff, see all the media stuff I've done, people that I work with, and you can send me an email through the contact form there as well.
Cool. All right, awesome. Well, let's see. I think that was most of the things that we had on the agenda for today. Is there any other like last top tips to best professionalism that you have for our audience today, Bethany?
Yeah, it's just kind of what you said really about, it's like putting the mask on yourself before you're kind of doing it with others. And I really teach this to sort of my mom clients too, is that in healthcare and stuff, we're kind of there to sort of help other people, but I find that we don't really help ourselves first. And like you said, you kind of need to be that leader and that example. And if you're doing that with your kids and you're trying to sort of set the example of like eating better, you kind of have to do that with, your business, is that you are the person running this business. And if you're not feeding it properly, giving it the sleep and looking after it properly, then, it's all depending on you, right? So that's why it's really important, I think, to focus on yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great message to end on. And I feel like everybody out there who's listening is going to be like, "Oh yeah, like that's a great idea, but implement it, folks."
Yeah.
you know?
Implement it one thing at a time, though, because
Yes.
sometimes it's just baby steps for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And like it's totally okay for it to not all come together immediately tomorrow.
Yeah,
Just one
exactly.
thing at a time. Well, great. Well, I think that will bring us to the end of our show today. Bethany, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And for everybody listening, thanks so much for tuning in. Again, if you want more information on how to start and grow your own healthcare practice, feel free to reach out to me. Links are down in the description. And then with everything that we talked about with Bethany's services, I definitely, recommend checking out her website and seeing what she has going on and all the great ways that you could partner together as well. And we will see you on the next episode.